It was almost midnight when Tony Stark walked through the big glass doors of the Horizon Skylark Hotel. He wore a simple dark jacket over a wrinkled t-shirt, walking calmly, looking like he had just finished a long day. The lobby of the hotel was huge with shiny marble floors that sparkled under soft lighting. There were elegant green plants placed carefully around, and outside the city lights twinkled like tiny stars. But inside the atmosphere was quiet and peaceful. The hotel felt like it was waiting for something big to happen. Tony was here for a special reason. He had recently bought the hotel in a private deal that most of the staff didn't know about. There were no big announcements or flashy events to tell people about it. Instead of making a big scene, he just wanted to see how the hotel ran when no one was watching. Tony took a moment to look around. He noticed the modern artwork on the walls and the beautiful chandelier hanging above. Everything seemed to be in its place. The hotel staff had carefully arranged everything to make it look perfect. Soft music played in the background, and Tony could hear violins making a peaceful tune. In the far corner of the lobby, there was a man behind the reception desk. He was dressed in a neat black uniform and was arranging white flowers in a tall glass vase. The man's name was Elliot, according to his name tag. Tony noticed how carefully Elliot handled the flowers, arranging each one with great care, like it was a piece of art. Tony remembered something a friend had once told him. The smallest tasks often show a person's true character. Watching Elliot at work made Tony think about that advice. Elliot finished arranging the flowers and looked up at Tony with a warm smile. "Good evening, sir. Checking in?" Elliot asked politely. Tony smiled back and nodded. "I'm just going to sit for a while. Had a long day," he said, settling into one of the leather chairs in the lobby. Elliot nodded, understanding. "Of course. Let me know if you need anything," he said, his tone respectful. Tony found a quiet corner and sat down in a soft chair. He let out a small sigh, feeling the weight of his busy day. He had been on several phone calls, attended a charity event, and even taken a quick flight into town. Yet something had drawn him here tonight. He couldn't explain it, but he felt like he needed to see the hotel for himself before making any big decisions as its new owner. After a few minutes, the elevator doors opened and a couple stepped out. They looked like they were in their 40s. The man, named Victor, was wearing an expensive blazer, and the woman, Sophie, had on a sleek cocktail dress with sparkling earrings. They both looked like they had enjoyed a fancy dinner and maybe had a bit too much to drink. They walked across the lobby, talking loudly. Tony could hear their conversation, even though they were far away. "It's unbelievable how places like this keep lowering their standards," Sophie complained, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. "Even the 5-star restaurants here aren't what they used to be." Victor nodded, his face serious. "I remember when Horizon Skylark had the best reputation in town. Now I'm not so sure." Tony didn't want to get involved, so he stayed where he was, pretending not to listen. But it was hard not to hear their loud voices as they approached the reception desk. They walked up to Elliot, who was still behind the desk, finishing some last-minute tasks for the night. "We had room service earlier, and it was ridiculous," Sophie said, her voice sharp. "I want to speak to whoever is really in charge here." Elliot raised an eyebrow but remained calm. "I'm the senior desk attendant tonight, ma'am. How can I help you?" Sophie looked Elliot up and down. "The place has really gone downhill," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Victor stepped forward, his voice low and condescending. "We've been coming here for 10 years, you know. The previous owners always knew how to keep things in order. Are you new here?" Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but then stopped. For a moment, Tony could see a flicker of hurt in his eyes, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he remained polite. "I've worked here for 5 years, sir." Sophie scoffed and laughed. "Well, I guess that says a lot about how things have changed here." Tony felt a wave of frustration. He had experienced this kind of treatment before, people making judgments based on how someone looked or what they assumed about them. It wasn't fair. He thought about standing up and telling the couple that he was the new owner of the hotel, but he knew that wouldn't help. Sometimes when people didn't know they were being watched, they showed their true colors. Tony decided to stay quiet and observe. Elliot, though clearly upset by the couple's rude behavior, didn't show it. He remained calm and professional. "I can help you with your concerns about room service," he said, his voice still polite. "We always strive to maintain the highest standards here at Horizon Skylark." Sophie sneered. "We'd rather speak to someone who actually understands what it means to run a hotel." Victor stepped closer, still looking down on Elliot. "We'll be filing a complaint about you and the poor service here." Elliot simply nodded. "I'll make sure your concerns are passed along. If there's nothing else I can do for you, please let me know." Sophie turned on her heel and marched back to the elevator, with Victor following behind her. Their footsteps echoed in the empty lobby as they left. Elliot let out a quiet sigh and returned to his work, straightening up papers and checking the hotel's bookings. Though Tony could tell that the words of the couple had affected him. He watched Elliot for a moment, feeling a mixture of anger and empathy. It wasn't fair. Tony had dealt with prejudice before in his life, both subtle and obvious, and he knew it when he saw it. He felt like stepping in and confronting the couple right then. But something told him that the night wasn't over yet. There was more to come. And sure enough, about an hour later, the elevator chimed again. Sophie and Victor came back to the hotel wearing expensive robes and slippers. They looked really upset. Sophie's face was bright red, and she looked like she was about to explode with anger. Victor was holding his phone tightly, staring at the screen. The two of them were clearly too upset to even think about going to sleep. "You again?" Sophie asked, her voice sharp as she pointed at Elliot, the hotel employee. "It's freezing in our suite. We tried adjusting the thermostat, but it's obviously broken. We can't sleep like this. I'm done with this place. Let us talk to someone else who can fix this now." Elliot glanced at the clock above the front desk. It was past 1 a.m. He wasn't sure what else he could do. "I'm sorry about the temperature," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I can send someone from the maintenance team immediately. Or if you prefer, I can move you to an upgraded room." Victor wasn't having it. "You dare talk down to us?" he snarled, raising his phone in front of Elliot's face. "I've already documented everything about your attitude from earlier tonight, and I've posted it online. Thousands of people have seen it. You'll regret treating us like this." Tony, who had been sitting quietly off to the side, suddenly felt his adrenaline kick in. He didn't like seeing people being treated badly, especially over something so small. He knew there was more going on than just a thermostat issue. Slowly, Tony stood up and walked over to the desk. This time, he wasn't going to stay silent. As Tony walked into the light, Sophie's eyes flickered with recognition. She glanced quickly at his face and her eyes widened. For just a second, her mouth formed a small O of surprise. Victor took a step back, blinking in shock. "Wait, Tony Stark?" he asked, his voice shaky. Tony gave a polite nod. "Yes, that's me. I was just here for a quiet stay, but it looks like I've stumbled into quite the scene." The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft classical music playing overhead. Elliot looked at Tony, surprised to see him talking directly to the angry couple. Sophie tried to calm herself down and explained, "We didn't mean to make a big deal about it. We've been staying here for so long, and we just didn't realize who he was. It's just that we expect a certain standard of service." Tony raised his hand and gently interrupted. "Can I see the post you made online?" he asked, gesturing to Victor's phone. Victor hesitated for a moment, but finally handed over his phone. Tony took a quick look at the screen. The post was about the hotel, but it was written in a way that made the hotel and its staff look bad. The post said, "The once great Horizon Skylark has sunk to hiring staff who have no idea how to maintain proper standards. We've never been so disrespected. Avoid this place if you want proper service." The language in the post was carefully written so that it wouldn't get flagged for hate speech, but anyone who read it closely could tell that the message was clearly meant to harm the hotel's reputation. Tony tightened his grip on the phone and turned to Sophie and Victor. "So, you believe you've been disrespected by Elliot?" Tony asked, looking at them. "By a senior staff member who has been working here for 5 years and has an excellent record?" Sophie and Victor fell silent. Neither of them could come up with an answer. Tony continued, crossing his arms. "From what I've seen, Elliot has been nothing but polite and skilled at his job. He deserves far more respect than you're giving him." Sophie tried to speak, but words didn't come out. She looked like she was searching for the right thing to say, but nothing came to mind. Elliot stayed calm behind the desk, staring at them quietly. Tony took a deep breath. "I should mention," he said carefully, "that I'm not just another random guest here. I actually bought the Horizon Skylark Hotel." Both Sophie and Victor looked stunned. "Wait, you own this hotel?" Victor asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "We didn't know that. We're huge fans of your work. We didn't mean to cause any trouble." Tony ignored their attempts at flattery. "You made trouble for Elliot, not me," he said. "You posted about him to your followers, making him look bad. Now because you know I own the hotel, you want to fix things?" Victor quickly began to apologize. "It was just frustration talking. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We'll delete the post and make things right." Tony didn't seem impressed by the apology. "I'm sure you'll delete the post," he said softly. "But how do you plan to make things right for Elliot?" Sophie shuffled her feet, looking a little embarrassed. "We'll apologize. Of course we will. And maybe we can do something nice for him in a new post. Maybe a donation or something?" Elliot glanced at Tony, who nodded. This was Elliot's chance to decide what he wanted to do next. Elliot cleared his throat and said, "I appreciate an apology, but just saying sorry isn't enough. Apologies without real change don't really help. If you're truly sorry, you need to take down the post, admit your mistake, and learn to treat every staff member with respect, no matter who they are or what they do." There was a long pause as Sophie and Victor exchanged glances. They both looked nervous, but they finally gave a quick apology. Victor pulled out his phone, likely to delete the post or change it. Tony softened his voice. "I'll also be having a conversation with the management team tomorrow to discuss how we handle situations like this in the future. For now, Elliot has given a fair solution. Remove the post, write a sincere apology, and commit to treating people with respect." Sophie nodded quickly. "Yes, of course. We're really sorry. We'll do that." Not long after, Sophie and Victor hurried off to their suite, probably to rewrite their post. The hotel lobby went quiet again, and Tony glanced at the clock. It was now 1:25 a.m. He looked at Elliot, who seemed to be a little less tense. "Thank you," Elliot said. his voice full of relief but still a little unsure. "I didn't expect someone to stand up for me like that." Tony smiled, though he looked a little tired. "You shouldn't have needed anyone to defend you. That's what we're going to fix." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Fix? How?" Tony smiled a little. "I bought this hotel without making a big announcement because I wanted to see how it really worked, the good parts and the bad parts. After tonight, I know we need to set clear rules about how we handle situations like this. We can't let staff be treated badly just because guests are rich or famous. From now on, we'll have a zero-tolerance policy for disrespectful behavior." Elliot's lips curved into a small grin. "That would mean so much to everyone. We've lost good employees because they felt unprotected. Some guests thought they could treat us however they wanted, and management would just brush it under the rug." Tony nodded. "That's not going to happen anymore." The next morning, Tony was in one of the hotel's conference rooms, even though he had only slept for about 3 hours. He felt energized and ready to start fixing things. Word had spread among the staff about what had happened last night, and there was a buzz of curiosity in the air. Tony met with several department heads: housekeeping, room service, security, and the front desk. Many of them looked nervous, unsure if they had done something wrong. Some of them had just learned that Tony was their new boss. "I want to keep this meeting casual," Tony said, gesturing for everyone to take a seat around the oval table. "I want to hear from you. We need to make sure incidents like the one last night are handled fairly, both for guests and for staff." There was a brief silence, and then Lena, the housekeeping manager, spoke up. "We've lost some good employees because they felt unprotected. A lot of regular guests felt like they could treat staff however they wanted, and the managers rarely backed us up. Elliot's not the first person to deal with this, but he's one of the few who stuck around." Tony nodded, listening closely. He knew this was just the beginning of a big change, and he was ready to make things better for everyone. Even after many problems, Tony leaned forward and said, "I'm making a new rule. If a guest is rude or treats the staff badly, I want it written down, and I want something done about it right away. There should be consequences. Our employees shouldn't be scared just because someone has money or a lot of followers on social media." Elliot, who was also at the meeting, cleared his throat and added, "And if a guest tries to ruin an employee's reputation online, that's also a problem." Tony nodded and tapped a piece of paper in front of him. "We'll watch social media for any bad comments about our hotel. If we find someone being mean or unfair, we'll respond kindly but firmly to protect our employees." The people in the room started to feel excited. They could tell that this meeting was different from the usual ones. They felt like real change was coming. Later that same day, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Horizon Skylark. It was Graham Bishop, one of the old owners who had sold the hotel to Tony. He rushed in, his face red and holding a briefcase, demanding to speak to the boss. When he saw Tony at the front desk, he walked over quickly. "Mr. Stark," Graham said, his voice tense, "we need to talk about the mess that happened last night. The Prestons are loyal customers. They're saying we created a bad environment, and now they're blaming us." Tony looked at him calmly. "The only bad environment was created by that couple who were mean to a great employee because they didn't think he was good enough." Graham's face tightened. "So you're going to take their side over our longtime guests?" Tony crossed his arms and sighed. "It's that old idea that money can excuse bad behavior that causes problems. If your reputation was built on giving in to bullies, maybe it's time for a new approach." Graham tried again, saying, "Don't you realize how bad this is? The news is picking up the story, and social media is full of complaints. Tony raised his hand to stop him. If we handle this right, the Horizon Skylark will be known for standing up for fairness and respect, which is a much better reputation than ignoring bad behavior. Graham, realizing he couldn't win, gave up. Well, you'll see how difficult this is. This place isn't just about good ideas, Tony quietly responded. It's about people. And if we don't treat people right, we don't have anything. With that, Graham walked away, muttering about how things used to be easier. Word about Tony's new ideas spread fast. Employees and even guests sent emails and messages of support. They liked the idea of fair treatment for everyone. Tony took all this in stride, making sure tasks were delegated and writing official rules called the Fair Hospitality Accord. These rules explain the rights of workers, what guests should do, and how the management would protect both. A few days later, Elliot proudly placed a framed copy of the accord on the lobby wall, right next to a beautiful arrangement of flowers. Staff members clapped quietly, and guests stopped to read the new rules. Victor and Sophie, who had written an apology for their actions, checked out of the hotel without making a big scene. They didn't cause trouble this time, and the staff noticed how quiet and humbled they seemed, as though they finally understood that money and status shouldn't excuse being unkind. One evening when the hotel was quieter, Tony saw Elliot in the lobby again arranging flowers. This time they were purple orchids, delicate and graceful. Tony smiled and asked, "What's with the orchids tonight?" Elliot grinned. "I'm trying something new. These flowers remind me of resilience." Tony nodded and then asked, "How are you feeling about everything?" "It's been a busy time." Elliot thought for a moment. "I'm grateful. It's not every day someone like you actually stands up for the staff. You didn't just change hotel rules. You changed how we feel about working here." Tony Stark hesitated but then answered, "I didn't do it alone. You and everyone else here were already keeping the hotel going. I just gave you the support you deserved." Elliot placed the last orchid into its vase and smiled. "That's the best kind of leadership, Mr. Stark. What can we learn from this story? It shows us that kindness and respect should always be important, even in fancy places. Sometimes it's the small acts of standing up for someone, or not letting money make people forget about decency that bring real change." Tony Stark's simple actions didn't just change the rules of one hotel, but it could also help change how many other places work too. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever seen or experienced someone being treated badly when you didn't expect it? How did you handle it? Or like Tony at first, did you just watch and wonder if it would make a difference if you stepped in? Your stories matter, and talking about them can help make real change. If you like this story and think it shows that every voice can help make things fair, please subscribe so you can hear our next story. We share stories about empathy, listening, and how one person can truly make a difference. If this story touched you, maybe you can spread kindness today. It could be as simple as thanking a worker, giving someone a nice compliment, or standing up when you see someone being treated unfairly. In a world where kindness is sometimes forgotten, one small act of courage can help create a bigger change. A world where respect and understanding are everywhere. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.